Okay. So, Mūla Nakṣatra. Does anyone has already a little bit of information about Mula? Yes.
The roots.
The roots, yeah, exactly. Very nice, very nice. Yeah. The translation of the Sanskrit Mula comes from the root Mula, so the word is the same as the root, and it means root or origin, source or basis, center. It's the first nakshatra towards spiritualization. And this is very significant because over here with Mūla Nakṣatra we see very nicely that nakshatras have a good side and a bad side, or a neutral side somewhere in between. And with Mula this is very obvious because Mula is very famous for being very destructive.
Okay.
So, and that is because Nirṛti is the deity of this nakshatra. Nirṛti. She is the goddess of destruction. So you would say, whoa, you are in your whatever dasha you are in, and your planet is in Mūla Nakṣatra, you can expect great destruction. Okay, with Mula, yes, you always have to be careful, but with good placements, Mula can actually work out very fine, and we will see this. So it's the first nakshatra of the last series because it's the 19th nakshatra. And if you come across such a volatile nakshatras, you always have to look at the whole chart of a person. You cannot just do one planet, one nakshatra analysis. You have to take whatever aspects or other conjunctions are there or yoga formation always in consideration. You want to look at the whole chart. And if you do that, what the nakshatras do, they work very nicely with symbols, deities, and Shakti or power. So, where is Mula situated in the sky? It says here on the board. You can read it. It's from, yes, 0 degrees Sagittarius to 13.20 degrees. And what is very significant is that the second degree here, this is the galactic center of our Milky Way. So therefore Mula, like you said, root, origin, source or basis, because over here we see that the second degree of Sagittarius aligns perfectly with the galactic center. So this can actually, even though it is ruled by Nirṛti, this can actually be a very spiritual nakshatra. So on the one side, you would have a nakshatra of total mayhem and destruction, but on the other side, it would give great spiritual qualities to a person. Yeah. So, what is really interesting to my observation here is that this nakshatra is these 9 stars formation with Shola Scorpionis being the brightest star, having 1.63 visual magnitude. It is actually these stars lie at the end portion of Scorpio. And this is very interesting because the nakshatra says to be starting at 0 degrees of Sagittarius. Yeah. It's actually the beginning of Sagittarius and the end of Scorpio. But these group of stars, that's where these planetary influences also come from. Yeah. Shola Scorpionis being the brightest among them. So,
that's the stars in Mula.
9 stars.
9 stars.
Yeah, these 9 stars, they are actually laying at the end of Scorpio.
And they give their energy. It's their energy of the stars.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. with Shola, Scorpion is being the brightest one. But we want to focus really, it is these degrees over here, the second degree of Sagittarius. And what we see also, we want to keep in consideration what is Gandanta degrees. This is another concept of astrology. It's a very famous concept that I can maybe quickly repeat. It's Gandanta. Gandanta. And who remembers what is Gandanta? Yes?
It's the transition of fire into water.
No, from water into fire.
Water into fire.
Yes.
Yeah.
So these degrees from Cancer into Leo, from Scorpio into Sagittarius, and what's the other one? From Pisces into Aries. So the last 2 degrees, of a water sign into the first 2 degrees of a fire sign is a karmic knots degrees, they call it. That is where Gandanta lays. It means pretty much also destruction. That's where these are degrees with lots of karmic knots, which are given to a person if you are born in such degrees. So the first degrees of Sagittarius is the first degrees of a fire sign. So there is lots of karmic activity there in those degrees. But can be on a good way, because the second degree is the galactic center. Actually it's 2.5, I think. So it's just behind the Gandanta degrees. Therefore, degrees are really important in astrology. You also always want to look at the degrees. Yeah. So, now that we spoke about Mula a little bit, what is the planetary ruler of Mula? This is the planetary ruler for Sagittarius. Yes, Jupiter is the planetary ruler for Sagittarius. But for the nakshatra itself, in the Vimshottari Dasha system. It deals over here, you can already see it, Nirṛti, the goddess of destruction. Ketu. Ketu would be ruling this nakshatra. The orientation is a downwards looking. It looks down. So it deals again with these roots, with the bases. Mm-hmm. What is the motivation? That's what we discussed also last time. You have the motivation, it can be moksha, artha, kama, or dharma. Which one of those 4 you think is the motivation of this nakshatra? Moksha? Moksha? That's a good point, but the ancient seers gave kama to this nakshatra. Yeah. Moksha would be a good point. But it is kama. Mm-hmm. It's passion. Yeah. Gana. It is human, it is divine, or it is demoniac. Which one would be the Gana? If you deal with Nirṛti here.
Pneumonia?
Yeah, Rakshasa. This is, we're gonna see this on the qualities of this nakshatra. There is it's lots of ignorance, it's lots of darkness involved. So the quality. Okay, yeah, maybe the qualities you don't know, but it is tikshna or sharp and dreadful. The quality is tikshna. Tikshna. It means sharp or dreadful. So pretty, yeah, it is famous for being very destructive. If you have bad placements in Mula, or a malefics in Mula and your dasha activates, pray. Yeah. Yes. The caste. In Vedic astrology, there is a few more castes that we originally know than the four. So the caste would be a butcher caste.
Okay.
So you can already start feeling the energy of this nakshatra, going through the how we find out what is this nakshatra all about. The guna.
Tamu?
Tamas, yes. Ignorance. Tamas. The Shakti would be, the energy of this nakshatra. This is really nice on nakshatra theory because we're dealing with Shakti. And the Shakti of this nakshatra is the power to ruin, to destroy, or break things apart. Power to destroy. But what is very nice is that it's also to break things apart, because once you go to the root of things and you're dealing with DNA and AI, for example, you break things apart in order to analyze, and we're going to see that this nakshatra makes great researchers break things apart. It's not only about the power to destroy, because you want to destroy to open up and learn what is really happening there on the levels that you cannot see with the naked eye. The element is air. Yoni is male dog. And the symbol... the symbol was a bunch of roots tied together, roots, or a lion's tail. So this is a little bit the division of this nakshatra, how we divide it. Yeah.
The last line.
The roots, like a
root and then lion.
A lion's tail is also considered a lion's tail, the tail of a lion. Yeah.
What is the yoni?
Yoni it's sexual energy. Yeah. It's male dog, dominant dog. Yeah. Now we have all this information. It will be easier for you to understand what we will discuss. Okay. So, Mula, what we found and what I found in research is that we have one chakra starting with Mula, the muladharā. Yeah, that is the first. It's the root chakra, muladharā. Very significant. And what does muladharā do? What does it stand for?
The upholding of the Adhar is uphold and Mula is root.
Root chakra. Yeah. It holds a special kind of latent energy that has to be awakened. Some people have awakened first chakra, but it's like a hidden energy lays in that nakshatra. And also karmic energy. It is considered the parabdha, or the destiny, and it holds the kundalini energy. So this is all related to Mūla Nakṣatra. But this karmic energy which is there can either bless you or curse you. And I have heard also from sources that if people try to awaken this kundalini, that something can go wrong. That's why if you deal with the first chakra, you always have to be careful, because it can be destructive rather than constructive. Okay, and there is another concept. There is the Mula Trikona. So you have exaltation, and debilitation of a planet. And who remembers what this is? If you have an orbit of a planet, the exaltation point would be the highest point, and then the planet starts to revolve backwards, and the lowest point would be the debilitation point. Exaltation point, you can consider this to be two grandfathers. And its exaltation point, the planet is very happy. Your grandfather is drunk and wants to share his gifts and donations with his grandchildren, is very joyful and playing and just shares all the goodness. You can consider this to be exalted. It's time to party. So the planet gives his very positive vibration there. Then the lowest point would be the opposite. Grandfather is very cold. And doesn't want to make fun with his grandchildren, and the grandchildren is wondering what is going on with this guy. So grandfather, very cold planet, it doesn't give good energy. In fact, it gives negative energy with lots of restrictions in a person's life. So Mūla Trikona. This is also a position of a planet. It actually means second best position. After the exaltation, there is a second best position for a planet. You also have own house, and this is, like when you have moon in Cancer, moon rules Cancer, so moon is considered to be in its own house. So very comfortable at home. You would almost say that at own house it's even better than exaltation, because a person feels just at home, feels very comfortable, nobody can touch you. And exaltation, you're like on your holiday, but eventually after your holiday you always go back to your own home. So own house is a very powerful position, and I would almost say that it's better than the exaltation. Yeah.
So Jane, regarding that, my Mula is in K2 and in the 12th house he's at home.
Your K2 is in Mula.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, in the Vimshottara Dasha system you can consider, K2 is in its own Nakṣatra. Yeah. But you have to look at, I have to look at your chart just to analyze everything. But okay, K2 and Mula would be considered okay, yeah, especially for the research part. I will discuss, and also for the healing part, because what we see is Mars, if Mars is involved, Mars and Ketu related to Mula give great healing powers, and you see like shaman people and herbalists and Ayurvedic doctors and all that stuff on the good side of Mula. So it's not only destruction. Always remember that. So the Mūla Trikona is the second best position for a planet. So for Jupiter, that would be from the first degrees of Sagittarius, from 0 to 10 degrees of Sagittarius. Maybe you want to write this down, because this is important. Because sometimes, like for example, if you have Saturn in Libra at, let's say 2 degrees in Libra, Saturn at 2 degrees, or you would think, oh, Saturn in Libra, it's exalted. But his Saturn, his exaltation degree is at 20 degrees. That means there is an 18 degrees difference. So Saturn would not be considered exalted, but rather in a great friend position or in a friendly position. So you always again want to check the degrees. Is my planet now really at its exaltation degrees? Or is my planet in its Mūla Trikona degrees? So for Jupiter, 0 to 10 degrees Sagittarius. For Mars, this is from 0 to 12 degrees in Aries. From Sun, it is from 0 to 20 degrees Leo.
Jupiter was what? Sorry?
Jupiter was 0 to 10 degrees Sagittarius. Mars was 0 to 12 degrees Aries. Sun was 0 to 20 degrees Leo. Then we have Saturn. His Mūla Nakṣatra is from 0 to 20 degrees Aquarius. And who knows the moon? Now it's in Taurus. For moon is from 4 degrees to 30 degrees of Taurus.
Oh, sorry.
Moon?
Yeah.
From 4 degrees to 30 degrees of Taurus. This is a really big chunk for Mūla Nakṣatra, so this is really nice for moon. Mercury is from 15 degrees to 20 degrees Virgo. And Venus is from 0 degrees to 15 degrees Libra. Now, we have something I spoke on, because this is, we have to repeat this a few times because it's also, for me, it stays very interesting. It is when you have a chart, when you have your chart, the first, the fifth, and the ninth house are considered one house. Jupiter becomes, if you have Jupiter becomes the Jiva Karaka. Sun becomes the Atma Karaka. Karaka means significator. And 1 minute. And Mars becomes the Deha Karaka. Mars, the Deha Karaka. This will come back, as an astrologer, this concept will come back to you. If you put Jupiter, for example, as the first house, it represents yourself, it represents the Jiva. Also, Mars represents the body, and the Sun represents the soul. And you have, like what you see in many religions and occult sciences and practices, is that you have this form of piece here also, where you divide a circle into 3. And the soul represents the sun, mind, emotions. Then the body, Mars, represents your worldly consciousness. And then the spirit or Jupiter represents his God realization. So with Mars you are more in your environment, you are more in your body. With Jupiter you are more in your intuition, your consciousness and God realization. And with the Sun you become more in tune with your will, your ego, your emotions. And your relationship with others, is seen from that. So this is also really interesting. Now, moon and Mula. If somebody has moon and Mula, it is pretty much means a desire to get to the truth. It makes a person an investigator, a researcher. These persons are direct and truthful. Mars and Ketu, if Mars and Ketu is involved with Mūla Nakṣatra, you see great healers, doctors, Ayurvedic experts, herbalists, shamanic people, astrologers, philosophers, druggists, psychologists, crisis counselors, emergency doctors, physicians, florists, fruits and roots vegans. because they all have this concept of root. You want to get to the root. If you want to study philosophy, you want to know how this works. If you study gene therapy, for example, you want to know about the DNA, how this really works. You want to go to the depth of your expertise. So occupations involve bundling, typing, binding, grouping together and organizing. And what we saw is Mars and Ketu, even though you would say it's make great healers and experts in spiritual practices and sciences. But when the 9/11 attacks happened, Mars and Ketu were conjunct in Mula. Yeah, so Mula, if you put you have to analyze how Mars and Ketu were positioned, but it was obviously not so good. Yeah. Also, when the pandemic hit, Rahu, we foresaw it already. We knew it like a few years before. Rahu was in Ardra. It was also a destructive, very howling nakshatra, the howls of the wind, the cries of the demons. Rahu was in Ardra and Ketu was in Mula. These are like the two most severe nakshatras. And when Mula, and what is very, very significant, when that hit, because Ketu is the 19th nakshatra, and how did they call the corona? COVID-19. COVID-19 hit. And what does Mula stand for? It's the hidden, the diseases, the bacteria. Yeah. And Ardra makes destruction together with Mula, and boom, pandemic. Yeah. So it was pretty obvious in the charts. There is also, because we're dealing with a male dog, and originally Brahma was related to this nakshatra, and Brahma was the god of procreation. It has also a very sexual and creative energy, and when with well-placed planets, it can give a good, great children, qualified children. Yeah. And the other side is then, of course, also true. So the strength of this nakshatra is that people under the influence of this nakshatra can face adversities with composure. They can face their problems with a chin up. And the weakness of this nakshatra is that it creates a lot of insecurities in the person. It can make a person arrogant and very self-destructive, and we will see this self-destructiveness because like when this nakshatra is weak, we can see that people easily become manipulated into cults or religious or terrorist groups, and you would see like suicide bombers within this nakshatra. They become completely manipulated and go against social norms, and for whatever reason just self-destruct themselves. Yeah. So it can, that is where you see tikshna, sharp, guna, tamas, power to destroy, rakshasha, that's where the bad elements come out that you see. Yeah. So also butcher, it is a butcher caste, so obviously it deals with sharp things, violence to innocent people, inflict pain and misery. It is tikshna, it's very sharp. Mula has dark secrets, very dark secrets. It deals with black magic, casting spells upon people, praying for the end of humanity, exorcism, punishments, and severe murder cases have been observed with this nakshatra. Yeah. For the ladies, what we have seen also is that it can make, especially when it comes to ladies, very angry, with suppressed feelings and emotions of loneliness, feeling deprived of life even though living a very wealthy and material life. So like a woman of rich persons, millionaires and billionaires, where the woman, even though she has everything, she feels lonely and deprived of life. It can give severe addictions. This is then for everybody again, where people deal with severe smoking and drug habits, and also self-destruct themselves. And then the humiliation. What we see is that a person a few times in their life will have to go, not even once, but with this nakshatra, like multiple times, go through severe, how do you say, moments in life. Yeah, that's actually pretty, in one way you can say very shameful, humiliating, self-destructive, and just completely lost. Yeah, completely lost. That's the wind element. You have the wind element. Element is air, and you put the deity. It can just throw a storm in a person's life, and not only once. It can happen multiple times.
What happens in multiple times in a lifetime?
Multiple times. Yeah. So, 1, 2, 3 times. And dealing with secrets. They deal with secrets in their life, especially when it comes to addiction. We see many rich people having secret alcoholism and drug abuse. And eventually they get themselves in trouble. Uprooted is the word. You get uprooted, like a tornado pass by and just uproots a tree and just swings the tree in the air. That is how your life's gonna feel like when Mula comes over you in a negative way. So it restricts, it gives karma, it gives emotional and mental karma. And the person just is unable to express his talents, because God gave you certain talents according to your nature, and you want to be active according to your nature. You want to express yourself with what you feel is right and with God's given qualities, but with Mula you feel restricted. You cannot express yourself according to the qualities that were given to you from birth. So this creates pain inside, for sure. So you have to see how deep are your roots. On the other hand, it's good for war, it's good for warfare, but eventually there will be a downfall at some point. A person can be directionless, without purpose, and it also, one of the big reasons for that is the ego. Is the ego, the name, the desire for name and fame. That is what actually destructs a person. Like thinking, I am the greatest. I know actually people like that who were in the music business and wanted the name and the fame, and eventually they get cheated, and they just don't know how to handle that. They were promised all these good things, money, woman, fame, all what you can desire when you are a teenager, I guess, but then you get cheated and the persons fall into a deep black hole in their life, and very, very difficult to get out of that one. Yeah. So for Mūla Nakṣatra, patience is required because we deal with lots of fierce energy, and especially before speaking and acting. Otherwise, the persons feel guilty afterwards. They act without thinking. The nervous system can be weak if it's afflicted. It can make a person very agitated in life and fearful that other people will hurt you. And you constantly live with this kind of fear and agitation, and you weaken your nervous system. So you have to, eventually this nakshatra has the ability to bring you back to your roots, because the only solution would be a spiritual inner awareness where you have to connect apart from all your ego and your name and your fame, to really connect with your true identity. That would be the solution if you suffer from these placements. To connect with your spiritual identity, with your eternal self, and to realize that the external world is just an observation through the senses. It has nothing to do with your real self. Yeah, so those persons, these agitated persons, they can just walk on the street and just, because they have this weak nervous system, they can just pick up a fight with anyone at any time, because they just feel constantly at danger, constantly fearful, constantly threatened. Especially in cities, you can have that. Your neighbors, you know, bad relationship with your neighbors, constantly agitated. And then the extreme side, before we finish, is that this weakness can be used. People can use that weakness. So these people become eventually then indoctrinated into terror groups or cult groups. And here we see Kali, because Kali is also at work here at his fullest. Kali, the goddess of destruction also. So it is important to analyze who is your teacher. You cannot just take anyone as a teacher, because before you know it, you will get cheated. And you become influenced to do things against social norms, like giving all your money to a guru who speaks flamboyantly and dances and make music, but has an unlimited bank account, for example. And we can actually give a very good example. Osho, he was considered as the sex guru. Yeah.
I heard about him yesterday, actually.
Yeah. So Osho, he had his Mars in Mula, Pada 3. And also Venus, Moon, Mercury, Saturn, was all in the 8th house. Eventually he was charged, or his community was charged, with bioterror through food poisoning its community, attacks on citizens. He was charged with murder. He was deported from the US, and 21 countries denied access for him. So over. Yeah. So there you can see the restriction coming into play. Yeah. And there was also Jimmy Swaggart, and he was a televangelist. It's like, what is a televangelist? It's like these big Bible preachers for like in stadiums where they preach the Bible. And so Jimmy had his Lagna, so his ascendant, first house was in Mula, second Pada. Ketu in the 12th house, as the sublord, was in the 8th house, and the 8th Lord Moon conjunct. So Jimmy, he eventually had a sex scandal, and he was very famous. So to have a sex scandal when you're very famous is not so good. With one prostitute, and he was suspended from his service. And the funny thing is that 3 years later he started again to preach, and he had another scandal. So it's like repeatedly 1, 2, 3 times that we see with Mula. It's not just one time. It can happen a few times. So this is what I had to say on Mūla Nakṣatra. And if you have questions.